Hello and welcome to Why We Are Christians. My name is Kent Philpott, and we're talking with Ron Huggins, and he is in Salt Lake City, Utah. And so there he is, and this is the second part of our program. If you want to hear more about Ron, you'll have to find it. You can find it easily enough. If you go to milleravenuechurch.org, I'm the pastor of that church, and you can poke around and you can find the programs, and you'll see our first half-hour program with Ron. So this is the second program with Ron, and so I'm going to continue. And the question I wanted to ask him is, you saw a film, I think, did you say University of Idaho?
Yes.
And it's called Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. I think it's the story of St. Francis of Assisi.
Yes, it was. It was a popular movie in the early 70s. Maybe came out in 73, I think. And but what happened? It was at the local college student union theater, and what they had there was they had a big plastic screen that it was projected from the back, and the theater was full. But a friend of mine and I knew how to sneak in there behind the screen and watch the movie in reverse. It was very dark. And so in the opening number now I had read about Francis, I'd read a lot of Christian books. I still didn't know the Lord. Somehow it just took so long to draw me in. But we snuck back in there and watched it. And the opening scene of the movie is Francis is coming back from the Crusades, and he's ill. He's at delirium. He's in delirium. And so he's laying there having these delirious memories. And then at one point he says in his delirium, "Forgive me, Father." And this is before the opening number, really. The opening scene is over. And God just it was like he just changed my life right then. I came out a Christian. It was like, it felt like my soul was just in knots, and it's like they got jerked straight, and from the time I left, I was a new creation, and soon after I went to a Christian, then I just started going to Christian meetings and reading the Bible and
how old were you at that point, Ron?
Well, I was just finishing it was the beginning of my senior year in college. So however old that was, I'm approaching 20, I guess.
Okay.
Maybe 21, I can't remember.
Okay.
It was 1976. Yeah, I would have been 21 in 1976.
You say here, I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, that you had been a heavy drinker.
That was one of the kind of depressing things, is that I was in the bar every night. I'd leave the studio where I was working in my art studio as soon as happy hour came, and I'd sit there talking with friends until they closed the place down. And my doctor was talking to me about it because it was not good. My dad, of course, he had died because of his alcoholism in a car crash. And so I was really concerned. And when I became a Christian, I didn't actually think of alcoholism as a sin, and I never have. Drunkenness is a sin. I didn't parse it out like that then. So immediately after becoming a Christian, I didn't have any immediate objection to drinking. Jesus had said, "Ask and ye shall receive." And so, I was filled with joy, and brand new Christian, and I thought, well, then I'm just going to ask. And I'd go into a restaurant and say, "I don't have any money, but make me something to eat." And they would make me a meal, and "Thank you, praise the Lord." Or else I also did that in the bar. "Hey, I'm broke, but give me a pitcher of beer." They'd say, you bum, here you go. And so that lasted about a week in the bar, because there was another guy there with a big, thick King James who was a Christian, I thought. And then one night we got out of the bar, and he'd revealed he had stolen a bunch of shot glasses. And I'm like, you stole those? You're not supposed to steal. Thou shalt not steal. What are you doing? He says, oh, they're only shot glasses, you know. And I said, yeah, I mean, if you're going to steal, if you're going to give up your integrity, do it for something worth stealing. Well, anyway, then I was sort of onto this guy and realized that maybe he wasn't the best example. And that brought my drinking career to an end. And so.
That's a great story, Ron. Now, the next issue is your baptism. Your baptism. Now, you'd been baptized as a child.
I was serious in college years about God. I mean, I had in my dorm room, I had a little altar where I prayed the rosary every day, and I would joke that my prayer life was more consistent sometime before as a believer than after. I'd go to the church at a Catholic center, and nobody was there, and I'd be lying on my face praying to God. Nothing coming of it, but just hungering. And so I become a Christian. And of course, the question is, do I need to get baptized? And I would ask different friends who were Christians who had come from Catholic backgrounds, and they'd have different opinions. I kind of count my baptism now, even though I didn't believe then. The strange thing is that one night I'm just sleeping and I have this dream, and our pastor is there, Jim Wilson, and he just puts a question to me. He says, well, what do you think baptism is without belief? And I said, a bath. And he said, right. And so next time my church, which met in an auto body shop, we're going out to to a river for baptism, I got baptized. So that's my baptism story.
So you got dunked.
Yes, I got dunked.
Yeah.
And I got dunked as a believer, and so that was the main thing.
Okay. In my question, reactions and emotions to Christianity, you experience inexpressible peace and joy, you wrote, Ron. Inexpressible peace and joy.
Just, it was like the great, yes, how can you describe it but inexpressible? And it was very, very much a blessing. And I had mentioned I was afraid of riding in cars after my accident some years before. But, I came to Christ and that fear just was gone. And I went hitchhiking, and then we drove to Texas that summer. It was just gone. God had just delivered me. And all this fear and junk and guilt from sin. I had mentioned I was in a relationship with some woman from a Hutterite background who had a husband somewhere, and I knew that wasn't right. And I'd been kind of guilty about that. So this guilt is removed. God's answering my prayers abundantly. I remember, I'd be praying, give us this day our daily bread. And somebody would hand me a loaf of bread on the street, And so, I guess maybe I should ask for some bologna too, to put on the bread. And so I was filled with delight. God, I remember it was difficult because I had to break the drinking habit. So, it wasn't, drunkenness was the issue, but I decided to just not go where I used to go to eat. I'd go down to another fish and chips place and eat by myself. Yeah, and it was just, it was great joy, great peace, great experiences with God's answering my prayers. But there was temptation, direct kind of confrontations. And it was in a way like God, you probably know about this from what you've dealt with and written, is that you saw the world differently. You would see things sort of from a spiritual dimension relating to other beings, demons and so on, that were involved.
You say your treatment from or reactions from family and friends, and you say, my friends all deserted me almost at once.
Yes. It was just like, get away from us. We don't want you, all this preaching Jesus stuff. One friend of mine was real long-haired guy. And one time I was in the Student Union building, and he came up and you got free coffee at lunch. And so he was making some comment about anti-Christianity. And I said, Ted, get me a cup of coffee. So he took my cup and he went and filled it for me. And about halfway back, he had qualms. And so he comes up and now you realize this is not God who got you this last cup of coffee. It was me, right? And so, yeah, but so my friends were not sympathetic at all. My family, of course, I think probably my mother was happy that, the concerns over alcoholism and that was taken care of. The real issue there was my not being a Catholic anymore. But when my grandmother was dying, my mother begged me with tears, please baptize your first child in front of your grandmother because she's afraid the child she'll go to limbo rather than heaven if she dies. And I said, I'm sorry, Mom, I can't do that. Now, since then, the Catholic Church has said, well, not necessarily, but at the time my grandmother was raised, this was an absolute. If you weren't baptized, you went to limbo. That was the kind of tensions. But I didn't undergo really rejection from my family. They haven't been particularly sympathetic with the gospel or with me telling them.
Okay. Now, we're almost halfway through our program, and there's a bunch of stuff I got to ask real quick. You have kids and grandkids.
Yes, 4 kids and grandkids.
Okay. How'd you meet your wife?
Oh, that's another answer to prayer. I think it's about time to get married. I was 24. I prayed that God would provide me a wife, and I kind of patterned the wife for this woman I had seen one time. And she ended up being my wife. I met her at the end of one semester. I asked her to marry me 1 week into the next.
Okay. And so you got 4 kids.
Yes, 4 daughters spread all over.
Yeah.
10 grandkids.
Okay.
And so we've got one in Washington, in Austria, in Utah, and in South Carolina.
Okay. Now, what did you do for a living? What did you do work-wise?
I was in a ministry, bookstore ministry in Idaho for a number of years. Then I was in school, and I did various student teaching and things like that. And then I taught at a private Christian school, then along with Moody Northwest, which is a Moody school in Spokane, or was. And then I taught at Salt Lake Theological Seminary, which is no longer. And then I taught at Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary until a few years ago. And now, as you can see, I'm an old guy. So
what did you teach, Ron? What did you teach? What was your...
Well, I was kind of at the one seminary in Salt Lake. It was a very small seminary, so I taught whatever nobody else could teach. And so I was mainly their church history guy. And then at Midwestern, I was a New Testament Greek guy.
Okay.
And I teach some church history. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, that's quite something. Some of the personal struggles that you had, you said definite spiritual attacks at time.
Yeah, you would find, one example that I think I may use, I'd be reading the scriptures, and it would be like if you're IB single, your whole body would be full of light. And it'd just be like this alternate voice comes in. Yeah, but that's not about Jesus. That's about single-mindedness. And it was, it was kind of that realm that's a little bit too far away from something going on in your own head. And so that would be an example of just straightforward attack. Another one later, I remember I used to have to cross this long bridge. And, I have no suicidal tendencies at all, but I'd be crossing the bridge, and then I just get this impulse, throw yourself down, and I just sing "Power in the Blood" for the rest of the way across, and it'd be gone. And it felt like this is something inside me, and just praying to the Lord, and then all of a sudden it's just gone. It's just like the devil gave up, and it was just completely gone. Yeah. And then also later, although I didn't mention it, God had given me kind of ministry to some mentally ill people. And there we had some pretty direct encounters with spiritual.
Yeah, I see here the early days as a Christian, God gave you a ministry with mentally troubled people. So these people you could identify because you've been there.
Yeah, and I mean, well, what happened is I had visited Yakima after I became a Christian. I wanted to talk to my best friend, and I ran into an old friend who had mental problems, very wealthy family, been to Switzerland for treatment, and nothing helped. And at that point, his tongue was hanging out like all the time, and I just felt like he was bound up with demons and stuff. And so I prayed, God, if you want me to help or minister, have him come over to Moscow. So he shows up, and he moves in to the flea bag apartment where I lived, and other people with big problems also move in, mental problems. And so, yeah, so that was, I wondered whether that would be my life's ministry. But as it turned out, it wasn't.
Okay. How do you, in Christianity, we have various theological positions that people take.
Right.
Where do you find yourself, Ron?
Well, I'm pretty open to fellowship across the board. My own theology is well, obviously teaching it. You wouldn't teach it Midwestern unless you had a basically Baptist theology. And so I do. I have, but we talked about J.I. Packer earlier, and he's an Anglican.
Yeah.
And yet I respected him very much. But so I would say I'm a Baptist if I have to say something. I mean, I like the old term Christian,
So now, theologically, would you say you're Calvinistic, Arminian, anything like that?
I think that there's a fellow who said that most mischief is caused when theological issues are summed up under two headings, neither of which quite makes it. So no, I'm not a Calvinist. My old pastor went real Calvinistic. You may have heard of Douglas Wilson. But anyway, so I'm not there, and I wouldn't identify as a Arminian either. Although I did a lot of reading of both of the guys. How about yourself?
Ron, you just said the same thing for me. I'm
Okay.
not a Calvinist. I'm not Arminian. I work with the paradoxes, and they're but I kind of meld them all together, and so I'm kind of in the middle of the road, and I don't really claim anything. I don't claim a theological position. I'm a conservative follower of Jesus, believe the Bible's a word, and preach Jesus. That's it. And I keep away from extremes. Keep away from the extremes, both theologically and politically. For example, nobody knows who I vote for. I just let all that go. I could care less.
And I understand why people became so involved because of issues like abortion and so on. But like Spurgeon said, you can call me an Arminian or you can call me a Calvinist so long as I can keep to my Bible, he said. So
yeah.
I'll go with that.
Yeah. I avoid all of those kind of controversies. Let me just ask you this question before I move into the sort of the end of it. I always say, are there any topics that you would like to address or speak to, Ron? Anything that that you'd really like to communicate about who you are and what's going on?
What I've just been doing lately, most recently, I don't know if you've heard of Gerald and Sandra Tanner. They are ministers to Mormons. And so I finished a biography just not long ago on them. And it tells about what God did in their lives. And I like that story to get out. And so, I mean, here I am in Utah. And so that's that.
Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City.
Where the Mormon Temple, I've been there a couple of times. Yeah. In fact,
Yeah.
we're studying through some of the cultic groups. We've covered Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Christian Science. The three that we've looked at. I like people in my congregation to be aware of all of these different positions, so I like to do that. So you you're going to a church now in Salt. Okay.
Evangelical Free Church, loosely associated. It's a basic evangelical church, but its actual affiliation's Evangelical Free.
Okay.
And we're very happy there, and we've been there for a number of years. And then, we also have in another part of the valley very dear friends at a Baptist church that we attended for many years. So.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we're actually part of two different Baptist denominations ourselves.
Oh, really? Which two?
Southern and American. What used to be called American, we call it now Growing Healthy Churches, but it was the old-time American Baptist and the Southern Baptist. The church is Miller Avenue started as an American Baptist church, so that's what we kind of stay with both of them. Stay with both of them. So I want to ask you, as we're nearing here, let me ask you, what are you doing ministry-wise right now?
And then I write. I mean, that's one of the things. If I have a ministry at this point, it has a lot to do with the things that I write. And I write a lot, and I write most of the time. So.
Okay. All right. Well, have you got any people can get at Amazon?
Oh, well, you can get the Tanner biography there. It's called Lighthouse, and it's just their story. But most of what I write is in journals, like Hindu Christian Studies or Jung History, Journal of Jung History, the different biblical journals. So I present at conferences and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I got to ask you your favorite book in the Old Testament. I always end the program with this, hopefully, and you say Isaiah and the Psalms.
Yeah, I mean, Isaiah is so grand, so wonderful, and it's, so foundational to the New Testament. But I also say that, you can't get away without Ecclesiastes and, so many other books. But I would say the Psalms and Isaiah.
Yeah. And then you say here, never mind Genesis.
Right. Yeah. Genesis is wonderful. Yeah. So I'm just always amazed at each book and its place in the Scripture and kind of its unique. Scripture wouldn't be what it is without Ecclesiastes over against Psalms, over against Daniel and Genesis, and then in the New Testament, the Gospels and Revelation. And I love Revelation, the book of Revelation, even though I can't figure out what it means.
I can't either. Every time I preach through Revelation, I change my mind about what it means.
Yeah, that's right. That happens to me. One time I decided I was going to figure it out, so I bought a whole big pile of books on commentaries on the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
Then I listened to it every morning during my paper route I used to have, and I think I probably listened to it dozens of times. Couldn't figure it out. So.
Yeah, I reserve the right to change my mind. On a lot of stuff, and I changed my mind a lot on the first 11 chapters of Genesis, which is, in my mind, the most puzzling. Okay, what is your favorite book in the New Testament?
No, I love the Gospel of Matthew. The obvious one would be Romans. And I wrote my dissertation on Romans. But I also do love the book of Revelation.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Now, we've just got under a minute, Ron, and I'm going to quote your favorite. I said, what is your favorite Bible verse? And it turns out it's Matthew 11:28-30. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. That's your favorite verse?
Yes. I think it really has a message for the church that it must keep in mind.
Yeah.
And also for everyone who would come to Christ.
Sure. Yeah, great passages. Well, Ron, here we are, and we're still doing it. We're still doing the work. We're still getting out and being able to be a follower of Jesus. One of the great things about being a Christian is we never retire from that.
Yes, that is. Yeah, I people who just say, "Okay, I'm retired. I'm going to fish."
So
God doesn't do that for us.
Ron, I got to close out. I want to thank you for being here, being with us, and all our connections, communications, emails, and stuff. I appreciate that. Thank you for the interview, and I want to remind our listeners here that you can go to milleravenuechurch.org, and you can find our programs. You can find the other one about Ron. So take a look, and we'll see you another time. So long.